Powering AI, Cloud, Infrastructure, and Scalability. The panelists are Professor Arthur G.O. Mutambara, Director, Institute for the Future of Knowledge at the University of Johannesburg. Naeem Sidat, Executive, Group Digital Strategy at Telkom South Africa. The moderator is Alexander Leibner. Every AI system, no matter how smart, needs a solid foundation to function. Fast processors, cloud platforms, massive data storage, and resilient connectivity. And as artificial intelligence transforms industries across Africa, from precision farming to digital finance, the demand for scalable, secure, and locally relevant infrastructure is more critical than ever. In recent years, we've seen major strides. South Africa now hosts several hyperscale data centers with Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and Huawei Cloud investing heavily in Johannesburg and Cape Town. These facilities not only lower latency for local AI applications, but also reduce reliance on foreign services, keeping African data in Africa. In Kenya, Safaricom and Google Cloud are partnering to bring AI and edge computing capabilities to mobile platforms, helping to scale everything from smart retail to digital agriculture. Nigeria is seeing a rise in homegrown cloud service providers like Layer 3 and Main 1, which are expanding access to enterprise-grade infrastructure without requiring international bandwidth. Building Africa's digital independence, infrastructure sovereignty, and long-term capacity to lead in the global AI economy is the real future of this continent.
All right, fantastic. Well, that set the scene for our next conversation, which I think has been a highly anticipated one. And it's always quite amazing when you watch these visuals, how they're trying, when you try and create a sense of reality around AI. There's always somebody looking at a piece of glass or robots walking the corridors. It's such a dramatic piece of technology, yet we can't really see it. It's really hard to visualize what it would look like. Now, for us, it's a matter of now discussing a topic that comes up at a lot of conferences that I've moderated on technology, and it's the story about, so who owns the AI, where does it sit, and if it sits with us, who's going to build it, and who's going to look after these server farms, not just from an AI perspective, but also from a cybersecurity perspective, which is another hot topic in terms of technology and securing these elements. So I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion around what my guests think is realistic, unrealistic, and who's going to pay for it and who's going to do it. So if Mission Impossible, the final reckoning is to be believed, we have an apocalyptic doomsday-proof data center just outside of Hoedspruit. But realistically, Africa's infrastructure, is it mature enough and is it ready enough to support AI at scale? And if not, what's missing? So I think, Professor Mutambara, you're closest to me. So do you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. The starting point is to go with the normative. We have no choice but to be players in the infrastructure that drives AI. We're using AI so much that we forget that AI does not run on water or air. It runs on infrastructure. When you say cloud, it's cloud to you, but it's physical infrastructure somewhere. So just to make sure that we understand why it is important, a company called NVIDIA, which is the key producer of the GPUs that drive AI, has a market cap as of today of $4.467 trillion. $4.67 trillion. It is the biggest company in the world. They don't do AI. They just do the GPUs, the chips that power AI. So if, as Africans, we're going to benefit from the AI revolution, we have no choice but to find a strategy to become players in the building and development of infrastructure that runs AI. For example, what Cassava has done. Cassava has gone into partnership with NVIDIA to bring in the GPUs into Africa. We need the data centers. We have to make sure that if we are going to benefit from the AI revolution with a strategy around AI infrastructure. So I wanted just to make sure that at the beginning we know that it's not a nice to have, it's existential. And in any case, if you're using other people's infrastructure, you're vulnerable to cybersecurity issues, and also you won't make the money. AI is contributing $11 trillion every year to global GDP, about 10% of global GDP. And as I've indicated, one little company called NVIDIA is holding $4.467 trillion. So the African, you have no choice but to be a player in the infrastructure that powers AI.
Okay. So not nice to have, but a have to have. Naeem, from a practical perspective, I know there's a lot of business people in the room here, and they've probably done the numbers on the back of an envelope saying, well, if we have to build these service centers and these data centers to manage this, it's a hugely costly exercise. Who's going to pay for it? Is it government? And if not, if it's a privatized exercise, will the rest of the world buy African AI like we've bought American or Asian AI in South Africa?
It's a great question, Alex. And when we started looking at that, one of the first things we asked ourselves is, what exactly is AI? And the more we unpacked it, the more we realized that there's a lot of power in perspective. And how you look at AI will help you answer these questions. The prevailing view, or the normative view, as Professor refers to, is to look at AI as a tool or an application. It certainly presents that way to us, and it's reasonable that we see it that way. But the reality is that the AI that we're experiencing today is actually the end result of a globally integrated and distributed value chain. And it's a value chain which, as Professor is alluding to, is highly concentrated. What that means is, if you look at the bits and pieces that make up the value chain, you go upstream, and the story of AI is very closely linked to the semiconductor industry. And where that starts, upstream, ironically, most often is on the African continent, because it starts with the raw materials. It starts with the silica, the graphite, the vanadium, the copper, all of those things that actually are used to create these modern chips that actually power the AI. So the starting point of the value chain very often is in Africa. Again, it raises that question of, do we export the raw materials? Are we beneficiating them on the continent? In which case, what is the infrastructure we need? That's not a data center. That's actually a production capabilities. And certainly the upstream elements of fabrication, of foundries, the designs and the chips from NVIDIA, the lithography, these things are in the hands of a very few. Lithography is 90% ASML in Holland. TSMC in Taiwan is dominating the foundry market, again, to that tune. And so when you start unpacking the value chain, you have to start looking closely. Where is the opportunity? And as if you're a business person and you've got capital, that is really the question, is where does the capital flow? And we see a lot of opportunity across the continent in the downstream parts of the value chain. And this starts from the computational power that's required to power these AI, or the AI magic. LLMs, highly concentrated still in the hands of a few, and are largely due to the fact that the majority of talent and IP, like the really cited research papers that are at the heart of everything we're using right now, about 70% of it comes from 3 countries: China, the UK, and the US. So if we're going to have to compete in LLMs, as I think one of the delegates asked the question, we've got to address the IP and the talent issue, because that's really where it starts. And certainly then what we're all exposed to is the applications that we build and assemble through these utility APIs that we've been exposed to. So the question of infrastructure very much depends on which part of this value chain you're looking at. If you look at computational power, then it's a question of who owns the data centers. If you're looking at LLMs, who owns the IP? If you're looking at the earlier parts upstream, it's what are mining companies doing to make sure that we're actually going into adjacencies to prepare materials that are then used in the chips. So I think it's a really massive question you asked around who pays for it. The reality is we don't, and I think earlier, Professor from UJ also raised this concern that a single country can't do this on our own. As Africans, we have to adopt a Pan-African view. And if you look at sub-Saharan Africa in particular, there's really only 2 countries in the Premier League, and that's South Africa and Nigeria. Premier League meaning the top 40 countries by GDP in the world. And those 2 countries need to find a way to lead, because the question of scalability and doing something sustainable, it requires deep pockets. And unfortunately, that's the reality of this. Those who have the deepest pockets are moving fast. And so it's a nuanced question you've asked. One I don't think has a simple answer, but it's got to start in an understanding of AI in all its constituent parts.
I mean, deep pockets is an interesting one in terms of South Africa and Africa, because some people might say, well, now we might have to redirect funds from other important projects on top of the regular infrastructure challenges that we have, be it electricity supply or water supply or basic infrastructure. Do we have the capacity or the willpower to try and do that on top of just getting the basics right? Professor, you want to grab this one?
Yeah. I think we need to understand that under the AI revolution, scale is very important. Numbers make a difference. We must work as the continent of Africa with a collective GDP of $3.4 trillion, a population of 1.4 billion people. Those are the numbers that will make sense to rush to China, to America, that will give us the scale that we need to pull our resources together and be able to play in this game. So, yes to national plans, but more importantly, let's have a regional AI strategy. Let us have a continental AI strategy where we leverage our numbers as a continent. Because, when you talk about AI, the energy required to do those LLMs, there's not a single African country that can do it on their own, unless we do Inga Dam, for example. A collective AI project can work if we have energy of the level that we can get from Inga Dam. Because these AI infrastructure aspects are very energy hungry. So energy, you need a lot of energy, which we can get from scale. Money, we can get a lot of money if we collectivize. And then talent, to do an LLM. Some of these companies have 100 PhDs in one company working on those LLMs. So if we're going to be playing in the space of infrastructure, we must, yes, have our national plans, but think more about how do we work as SADC, ECOWAS, as East African Community, how do we work together as the African continent. Now, when you say Nigeria and South Africa are in the super, they're not. In terms of thought leadership on AI, Rwanda and Kenya are ahead of South Africa. I've done this study. So yes, the economy is big here in South Africa. Yes, the economy is big in Nigeria, but in terms of ideas and thinking through what's required for the AI revolution, Rwanda has done a better job. Kenya is way ahead of South Africa. So we must be very careful that we learn from the smaller countries. Learn from Singapore, learn from Malaysia, learn from UAE. We must leverage global best practice from across Africa and also from the global south. So going forward, I want to emphasize the need to work together as a continent of 1.4 billion people with a collective GDP of $3.4 trillion. Then we can have the amount of energy we need, the amount of money we want, and also the talent that is required to play in the role in the space of the hardware for AI.
All right, so Rwanda or Kenai might be a thing going forward in terms of AI. But are the frameworks and the regulations aligned enough to make this happen fast enough? Because speed is a situation right now. And we've been debating inter-Africa trade, inter-Africa travel, goodness, for the last 10 or 20 years. And I think we still haven't made as much progress as I think a lot of people would like. So if we can't trade across borders, if we can't travel across borders, how are we going to get all these governments to talk to each other?
Let's start with the framework. What we need in every country in Africa is a national AI vision. Having gotten the vision, we have a national AI strategy, which is the game plan that says from where we are, how to get to the vision. But more importantly, number 3, we need what we call a national AI implementation matrix. National vision, national strategy, national implementation matrix in each African country. But that's not enough. At every regional level, SADC, ECOWAS, East African Community, Maghreb, we must have a regional AI vision, a regional strategy, and a regional implementation matrix. But that's not enough. We need a continental AI vision, a continental AI strategy, and then a continental AI implementation matrix. Those three levels, country, region, and continent, must talk to each other dynamically. That way we can then start to address the issue of how do we do AI together. You're very correct. We've talked integration for a long time. We've not done it. But we must understand that it's no longer a nice to have to work together. It's about survival. And why do we need 55 presidents in this little continent of ours? We have 55 people calling themselves president. China has 1.4 billion people, GDP, $19 trillion, they have one president. India has 1.2 billion people, a GDP of about $5 trillion, they have one prime minister. What's wrong with you Africans? 55 of you. This is the problem. We do not care much about integration. We talk it. Because, when we are united, when we have the United States of Africa, there will be one president, maybe coming from Gabon. Ramaphosa will be Minister of Agriculture. Is he ready? Mnangagwa will be Minister of the Police. So I'm just confirming your skepticism that these Africans are not serious about working together. They talk about it only.
Wow.
Perhaps.
What a way to kick into the afternoon.
I know, Alex. Yeah, and I think it's a highly emotive topic with a lot of opinions in terms of what we should be doing. And I always like to think that irrespective of whether the politicians are reorganizing themselves, at the end of the day, we need to think about every single citizen of our continent. That's really the level we're going to go to. And what we're seeing with AI is not too dissimilar to what actually we've been dealing with over the past 30 years when it came to the digital economy. The reality is, and earlier it was spoken about, we have a massive problem with inclusion. And beyond the big stuff, at the very simple basic level, which is what you're talking about, there is the electricity problem. So you can't connect to the digital economy if you don't have electricity. And with that, there are 4 other really vital elements. You can't connect to the digital economy meaningfully if you don't have facility. We take it for granted that you can access a facility where you can sit at a desk and have a light and have a chair. There are millions and millions of people who don't have facility. And then you look at other elements, such as connectivity. That's where we as a group are stepping in and saying connectivity is a thing we've got to address at scale across the continent. And then there's technology. You can't participate in the digital economy if you don't have the latest technology to make you a meaningful player in that economy. And earlier it was said by one of the speakers that the fundamental thing, I think Jeffrey said it as well when he was talking about this, is literacy. It is the elephant in the room. We have not made a meaningful dent on literacy in all its forms across the country. We still struggle with endemic levels of adult literacy. And if you're not literate, how on earth are you going to transition into the digital space? And then how on earth are you going to transition into the AI space? So, these 5 elements of electricity, technology, connectivity, literacy, that's our new big 5. Those are the barriers to entry. And we've got to be serious. And I agree with Professor, you can't solve these things alone.
Yeah.
It takes a village, and it's going to take a village to really pull up its socks and actually get going and doing something.
Well, I think it's become quite clear that AI is a team sport. I mean, you can't sort of do this as an individual entity. The question I want to pose to you, Naeem, do you believe that the suppliers and the cogs that need to make this happen, if we got the whole of Africa and its presidents all to agree that we need to do this, is there enough capacity on the continent for the technology providers to actually implement this? I mean, we're having a similar situation now in Europe with the car industry, where they are completely dependent on Asia to supply them with batteries, with all kinds of elements. By the time they've made a car, Asia has made a car that's a third of the price with all the bells and whistles. Could we find ourselves in a similar situation because we don't manufacture any of these items that we need to produce these server farms on the continent?
Yeah, could we? Absolutely, we could. But equally, we couldn't. And we could find ourselves in a very powerful position. I think this is what Professor's alluding to earlier. We had a chat in the break. that if we make the right calls, the reality is that this is nothing new. AI as a transformative, radical technology which is introducing system-wide innovation across economies and society is not new. We've had technologies approach us. What is different, though, is the speed at which this is happening. And that has introduced a pacing problem. So the speed of the technology, it's advancing at a pace that is beyond our ability to control and regulate it. And then the other problem, there's a black box problem, that a lot of us actually just don't know how this thing works, and yet we bring it into our worlds. So if we're able to decide and make meaningful decisions around how we organize, how we configure, and how we go about doing things, we will find that, like in the past, we can be beneficiaries of this revolution. The alternative, well, you could be a casualty. And this pattern has played itself out time and time again over history. And the question of whether you want to be a casualty or you want to be a beneficiary of AI, like that's in every single person.
Yeah.
And I think earlier, the very emotive topic of jobs, that was kind of touched on to go, well, you got to decide. Either this thing is going to replace you or you're going to make a decision to embrace it, be part of it. And I mean, the other very difficult but real issue to deal with is that AI is going to make jobs transportable across borders. And so, yes, there may be net increase in jobs globally, but if we don't act now, those jobs might actually move from us to somewhere else. And so, yeah, policy decisions need to be very, very effective, but most important is speed. We just have to do it quickly.
Yeah. Professor.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to that. Your question. Partnerships. We can partner with the Chinese in building infrastructure. We can partner with Indians to build infrastructure. Partner with UAE, partner with the United States. We must leverage what we have. The critical minerals are in the DRC, they're in South Africa, they're in the continent. In terms of critical minerals, Africa has 35% of the world's critical minerals. And the critical minerals are very important for the AI revolution, for the green transition, but we are churning out raw critical minerals from Africa. Why don't we partner and build the hardware in Africa with the Chinese? Build the batteries in the DRC with the Chinese. Build the GPUs in Africa with Taiwan. So in other words, we're saying that we will not be able to do it alone in isolation, but we can partner and leverage our strength. Our strength is the raw materials, the rare earth minerals are here. Why don't we use them as leverage to build partnerships with our colleagues in the global south, our colleagues in the global north? Talent. You know, China is producing 1.4 million engineers a year, 1.4 million. America is producing 100,000. The Chinese are not playing in this game. And so, you know, in terms of superintelligence, the problem why people are pursuing superintelligence is because whichever country achieves superintelligence first, there will be an asymmetric advantage on their opponent. If America achieves superintelligence today, America is on top, China is below. If China achieves superintelligence, it's a step function. So the competition, the geopolitics of AI also factor into the issue of infrastructure. And so it's important that we understand that, yes, let's work together as Africans, but let us also partner with others who can work with us. Energy. You know, I'm just trying to, Naeem here is very right. You can't talk AI without energy. Now we talk about load shedding, schedule 100. We're not serious. You have load shedding schedule 100 and you want to do AI. No. You must resolve the issue of energy poverty on the continent. Without energy, there's no AI. Without data, there's no AI. Right now, some companies are building their own nuclear power plants to power AI. That's how much power they need. They can't get enough from their own grids in their own countries. So they're putting together nuclear power plants just to get the energy they need to do the LLMs. So we must make sure that we don't put the cart before the horse. Fix infrastructure, fix energy, talent, awareness, and mindset. there's a lot we need to do if we're going to play a role in the infrastructure that runs AI.
For sure. No, I agree with you. And I think also, like you said, casualties. Is it cybersecurity? Is it our data sitting in other countries' data sets? And then, of course, also from a philosophical perspective, will our African languages be represented on these non-African AI platforms? You know, will Swahili have a space? Will Xhosa have a space? That is, of course, another debate for a whole other session. But I want to just quickly throw out if there's any questions.
I want to just emphasize what you said.
Yes.
The AI revolution is not neutral. It carries the interests and the values of the creator of the AI system. You know, I think it was Walter Isaacson who said the following when they were launching the book by Kissinger and colleagues who wrote a book on geopolitics of AI. We must make sure, and I'm quoting Isaacson, we must make sure these AI systems have our values, our American values, not those of the Chinese. So those who are building AI systems are putting their values and their interest in these things. That's why Africans must be creators of AI systems. Don't just be consumers. We must build and create AI systems and put our own values in those things. And the Chinese, are they Father Christmas? No, they are not. Tonight, go and to DeepSeek R1, go and type. DeepSeek R is a free program, go and type. Can you tell me what happened at Times Square? What were the causes? DeepSeek will say to you, I'm an AI assistant. I'm not supposed to answer that question. Sorry, I can't help you. Because the Chinese have made sure that you don't talk about their bad history using their AI systems. So, there is no neutrality in the AI revolution. The AI revolution is not neutral. The African is absent. Go and build your own AI systems and put your own Ubuntu into the systems. I am because we are. We are because I am.
All right, Professor, let me open this up to some questions. I'm sure there's some burning questions here. This lady in the front here, if we can get a microphone to this table over here. Okay, we'll take two questions. I'll come to you now. I know you put your hand up. Okay, we've got one over here. If you just give us your name and just keep it short, please.
My name is Maitebe, and I'm from Truecaller, and I also sit on the board of Oxfam South Africa. Just last week, we were talking about the just energy transition, as well as the poverty that comes with that. And you're right, Professor. I just want to get a sense, because what we've been talking about the whole morning has been how do we lead AI? And I think there are many entry points into AI, particularly leveraging our critical minerals. And if you look at the Lobito corridor, in terms of what Zambia is doing, they essentially are going to be using those proceeds to reinvest in terms of skills, healthcare, and et cetera, et cetera. So the question I have for you is, what will it take for South Africa to have a similar coordination in terms of critical minerals and the just energy transition to be able to lead both in terms of the AI revolution, but also clean energy?
Okay, I'm going to take the other question as well, and then we'll answer both of them. Okay, so just hang on to that. Let's take the other question as well, and then we can, make a note on that.
Thank you. My name is Monde Sussman. I'm a PhD candidate on AI. The question for me is, in South Africa, we've been talking about this national dialogue, and I think sitting in, listening to the education professors earlier and the business, what we actually need is a national dialogue on AI. The last time this government actually created some kind of a forum on AI was way back in 2023. And if you look in terms of the 4IR, where Professor Mawara from UJ, it was back in 2023. Everyone is talking. There is a paucity of leadership on AI. We need a dialogue on how we can define ourselves as a continent. At the Paris Summit earlier this year, it was concluded that the US innovates, the EU legislates, and you've seen the AI, the EU law. China duplicates. We need to ask ourselves as a continent, what is our role? We can have those national dialogues, we can have those continentals. The AU has got something that's coming in terms of frameworks, but we need to define our space.
Okay.
In terms of the Ubuntu and the values that are quite critical that we can be able to own. We are not owning anything at the moment.
Okay, cool.
Thank
I'm going to just leave it there. We're chasing time. So do we want to kick off quickly with that, a national dialogue on AI? Good idea, bad idea? Should we do it? Is it an email? What are we saying?
Just a quick, and just to confirm what she's saying. South Africa is very behind in terms of preparing for the AI revolution. I've done this study. I've looked at 10 countries. In Africa, I've looked at Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Mauritius. The top 2 countries in terms of organizing around AI are Rwanda and Kenya. So you are very correct. We need to get our act together in South Africa around preparing for the AI revolution. When you say US innovate and Europe regulate and China duplicate, you're understating the Chinese are innovating as well. The Chinese are likely to beat the Americans on innovation. This is the traditional thinking that the Chinese are just copying. They are not. They are producing 1.4 million engineers a year and moving. Now, just transition. Here is the message to Africa. We are going to do the just transition on our terms. We will decide when to put down our coal. We will decide when to stop using gas because we have energy poverty. In South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, there's a woman who has never experienced an electric bulb. How do you talk energy transition when there's energy poverty? Yes to green energy, yes to renewable energy, but on our terms. We will determine how we get there. If we say we're going to be using coal for the next 10 years, we'll do so, whether the Americans like it or not. Because coal is about jobs. Coal is about energy security for our people. So yes to just transition, but I must emphasize on our terms. We'll determine how we do the just transition, not Anglo-Sam or the Europeans. Critical minerals. We should not allow a single critical mineral to leave Africa unprocessed. No lithium, no nickel, no graphite, no diamonds, no platinum unprocessed should leave the continent. We must have catalytic converters. We must have batteries built in the continent using our critical minerals. Our critical minerals are our leverage. We must not allow in South Africa, in Botswana, any exportation of unrefined critical minerals. Lobito corridor. Yes and no. I'm not very impressed by the Lobito corridor. The idea of a corridor is channeling raw materials from DRC, Angola, and Zambia to the ocean to go to America. When Joe Biden came, they discussed building a corridor to take raw materials. They should have discussed Inga Dam and building batteries in Africa and building catalytic converters in Africa. So the Lobito corridor, yes, it's a good effort in some ways, but I am worried that it's a corridor to take our minerals to America and Europe. We don't want that corridor.
You know, from my side.
All right, let's give him a round of applause. We've run out of time, but Naeem, I'd like you to weigh in on these questions.
Final thoughts, I think, you know, the question about do we need a national dialogue? Yeah, it's important to talk. But I think more important than that, we actually need a national mindset, which is what Professor's alluding to. What is that mindset? Our superpower as South Africans in particular, we are a land of big ideas. We think big, but then all our plans are huge and big, and as a consequence, we don't execute anything. And we've got to start moving to a point where we think big, yes, but we start small, we move fast, and we execute and we do. I think that's the mindset, the shift that's got to happen, is we paralyze ourselves because we think that these things are much bigger than they are. We've just got to start and we've got to act.
Amazing. Well, I couldn't have thought of a better fireside chat after lunch. My guests, thank you so much for joining us. Give them another big round of applause as we clear the stage. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you.